Hello and welcome everybody to another episode of Books and Bytes discussing Andrew Roberts' The Storm of War, a new history of the Second World War. We're about to take a deep dive into this truly monumental work. It's not just a recounting of events, it's a comprehensive and often surprising look at the sheer scale, the intricate decisions, and the devastating human cost of the Second World War. What Roberts really brings to light here is how human ego, strategic miscalculations, and, well, even a twisted sense of legacy profoundly shaped every brutal reality on the battlefield.
Exactly. And this deep dive will really emphasize how Hitler's, remarkable misjudgments, the shocking brutality that unfolded on multiple fronts, and the pivotal role of both cutting-edge technology and human intelligence truly shaped the conflict. Roberts sort of peels back the layers, to reveal the complex, sometimes deeply contradictory leadership that defined both the Allied and Axis powers. He does this all while presenting a meticulous chronological account, but yeah, always with an eye on those deeper currents. So let's unpack this incredible journey through one of history's most pivotal periods. Roberts starts us right at the seeds of conflict, showing us how Hitler meticulously consolidated power in the 1930s. He secured the German army's reluctant acceptance, gained public approval with an almost 90% yes vote in a plebiscite, and then, crucially, rapidly rearmed Germany, openly defying the Versailles Treaty. What was Roberts' key takeaway about the speed of this initial defiance?
Well, what's fascinating here and what Roberts really drives home is the sheer audacity and speed of that rearmament. He shows how Hitler wasn't just, planning, he was executing at a breathtaking pace. By February 1935, Hitler was privately planning a massive 63-division army for 1939. And it wasn't just land forces. Goering officially announced the Luftwaffe, Germany's new air force, in March 1935. That's the very same month Germany publicly repudiated the disarmament clauses. So Roberts argues this wasn't a slow buildup. It was an aggressive, immediate reassertion of power, designed to test the will of the Allied nations, really.
And it certainly tested them. By March 1939, German troops occupied the Bohemian and Moravian parts of Czechoslovakia, bringing non-Germans into the Reich for the first time. Later that month, Hitler denounced the non-aggression pact with Poland, which led Britain and France to guarantee Poland's defense. Roberts highlights this as the undeniable tripwire, right?
Precisely. And that tripwire was almost immediately sprung, but not before a chillingly cynical move. Roberts points out the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact in August 1939. That essentially gave Stalin a free hand in the Baltics, leading to the annexation of Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia. But the immediate, shocking trigger for war was meticulously staged. On August 31st, 1939, an unnamed concentration camp inmate was dressed in a Polish army uniform and shot at a radio station near Gliwice. This Operation Himmler, as Roberts reveals, was used as a pretext for invasion, making that anonymous man the very first death of the Second World War. It's a stark, horrifying detail he uses to underline the nature of the regime from day one.
A truly horrific and calculated beginning. Hitler launched the invasion of Poland a week later with his best troops, adopting a strategy of a weak center and strong flanks. We read about figures like Guderian leading rapid armored advances, combined with aerial bombing and machine gunning of refugees, leading to utter chaos. What does Roberts emphasize about the Allied response to this initial blitzkrieg?
He paints a very clear picture of Allied inaction, which he argues was a critical early failure. Despite British and French declarations of war on September 3rd, their response in the West was, well, minimal. A French advance into the Saarland, for instance, was short-lived and achieved little. This period, often called the Phony War on Land, lasted until April 1940. Robert stresses that this lull was a lost opportunity for the Allies to capitalize on Germany's relative weakness at that moment. They weren't fully mobilized yet.
It sounds like a period of rapid expansion for the Axis powers, though not without surprises. Roberts introduces us to the Winter War, when in November 1939, Stalin, seeking to protect Leningrad, invaded Finland. You might expect a small, ill-equipped nation to be crushed, but Roberts shows how the Finns, despite being tiny and ill-equipped, inflicted devastating losses on the overconfident Red Army. What made the Finnish resistance so remarkable in his account?
Roberts really spotlights Finnish ingenuity and resilience. They employed brilliant tactics against Russian troops, often lacking proper winter gear, and, astonishingly, using on-clear radio transmissions. That's unencrypted messages, easily intercepted. At Suomussalmi, Finnish troops even used bombers to smash ice, sending rushing tanks and men into freezing water. Roberts dryly notes, they are still there. This White Death warfare resulted in staggering losses. 27,000 Russian deaths for a mere 900 Finnish. It's a powerful example Roberts uses to show how smart, unconventional tactics can temporarily defy overwhelming odds. Lesson maybe not lost on the Germans observing from afar.
A stark contrast to the swift fall of France, which began on May 10, 1940, when Germany launched its invasion of France and the Low Countries. The Blitzkrieg was devastatingly effective against an unprepared Allied force. Rotterdam was heavily bombed, creating a stark symbol of Nazi terror tactics and causing a mass exodus of French refugees. Roberts goes into detail about the halt order at Dunkirk. What does he draw from that pivotal moment?
Yeah, he delves into the controversy around that infamous halt order for German panzers outside Dunkirk on May 24. Initially, Rundstedt's decision, it was upheld by Hitler. Hitler feared the Flanders marshes and, remarkably, believed the British won't come back in this war. Roberts views this as a significant strategic miscalculation on Hitler's part, a moment of overconfidence that provided a critical window for the Allied evacuation, Operation Dynamo. It's a fascinating insight into Hitler's psychology and how it directly impacted the war.
And what an evacuation it was. Roberts highlights acts of incredible courage, but he also unflinchingly details horrific massacres of British POWs by the SS at Le Paradis, demonstrating inhumanity, even when Germany was on the eve of her greatest victory. Eyewitness accounts capture the chaos, including Stuka dive bombing that looked like filthy vultures and officers shooting their own men to prevent stampedes. France fell rapidly, and by mid-June, Marshal Pétain established the Vichy government, legally constituted but widely seen as deferring to Germany. What's Roberts' take on French collaboration?
He acknowledges that while some French citizens willingly collaborated, the compulsory drafting of 650,000 workers into German factories in 1943 drove many into the resistance. This, Roberts notes, led to brutal civil war within France, with the Vichy Milice, a collaborationist militia perpetrating horrific tortures and massacres. He places ultimate responsibility squarely on Pétain for these actions, showing the deeply divisive impact of the occupation on French society. It's a very complex picture he paints.
With France gone, Britain stood alone. Churchill galvanized the nation with his finest hours speech. Roberts points out that Hitler, initially reluctant to invade Britain, wasted precious time sightseeing after France's fall, believing the British have lost the war, but they don't know it. This gave Britain vital time to prepare for the Battle of Britain, which began in August 1940. What were Roberts' key insights into Britain's survival here?
Roberts attributes British success crucially to the Dowding system, their integrated air defense network, and the critical advantage of radar, invented by Robert Watson Watt. He quotes German flying ace Adolf Hitler lamenting, "The British had an extraordinary advantage which we could never overcome throughout the entire war." That says a lot, doesn't it? Roberts also highlights the iconic British planes, the Hurricane, which shot down more German planes than all other RAF planes combined, and the Spitfire, described by pilots with the language of love as a perfect lady. This was a battle of technology and intelligence as much as pilot skill. Really, a combination of factors.
And it seems German intelligence was massively off the mark. Roberts reveals they relied on pilots' overstated kills and massively miscalculated RAF strength, leading to Luftwaffe demoralization. But despite Britain's success in the air, the Blitz, Germany's bombing campaign, began with a massive raid on London's docklands on September 7th, causing an inferno worse than the Great Fire of London of 1666. How does Roberts frame the British response to this terror?
Well, Hitler envisioned total destruction of London with incendiary bombs, as he told Albert Speer, but Roberts emphasized the remarkable resolve of the British people. Though strained, their spirit did not break. He encapsulates this resilience with that famous poster, "Keep calm and carry on." The Battle of Britain was safely over by the end of October, a testament to that resolve. Roberts positions it as a crucial turning point, not just militarily but psychologically for both sides, a huge morale boost for Britain.
The war then truly expanded globally, starting in the Mediterranean and North Africa. In December 1940, Operation Compass saw British forces under O'Connor achieve a stunning victory, defeating a force 4 times their size, capturing 130,000 prisoners and winning Roberts' first really significant land victory at Baie de Somme.
Yeah, a really significant win. Yet Roberts points out British blunders in Greece and Crete in 1941, which stretched forces thin. A bit of overreach, perhaps. However, a silver lining emerged. Heavy German paratrooper losses on Crete meant they were never to employ another airborne assault again. That was a costly lesson for the Germans. But then Rommel's Africa Corps offensive in May 1942 led to the fall of Tobruk, a major blow that Roberts says caused Churchill serious political worries. It really shook things up.
But the truly cardinal error of the war for Hitler, according to Roberts, came in December 1941 with Operation Barbarossa, the invasion of the Soviet Union. Roberts details colossal numbers of troops, 4 million Axis men, and initial surprise. But how does he argue the Nazis immediately squandered any chance of acting as liberators?
This is where Roberts is absolutely unflinching. He makes it crystal clear that the Nazis' policy of Lebensraum, or living space, meant mass liquidations of Soviet POWs and the enslavement or extermination of Slavic peoples. The sheer brutality from the outset, he argues, eliminated any chance of winning over the populace. Any potential anti-Stalin sentiment was just crushed by Nazi actions. He paints a grim picture of the siege of Leningrad, where civilians were reduced to eating sawdust and moldy grain, just horrific suffering. German forces were also hampered by the infamous Black Earth mud, which bogged down their advance, and then the brutal Russian winter, with gun oil freezing in rifles. Logistics nightmare. Roberts highlights Hitler's micromanagement and standard die orders as betraying a World War I trenches mentality and a psychological inability to concede ground. He explicitly contrasts this with Napoleon's strategic retreat from Russia, a parallel Hitler chose to ignore at his peril. It's a key point Roberts makes about Hitler's flawed leadership.
And just as Barbarossa unfolded, the global conflict expanded significantly with Japan's attack on Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941. Despite warnings, American planes were destroyed on the ground, notably at Clark Field in the Philippines, where pilots were apparently queuing for lunch when the Japanese struck. Unbelievable.
Right, and what's truly striking, and a key Roberts insight, is what happened 4 days later. Hitler, without consulting Japan, declared war on the United States. He believed he was normalizing an existing state of affairs and forcing America into a two-front war. Roberts highlights this as sowing the seeds of Germany's defeat, big time. He argues that Hitler massively underestimated America's industrial might. The U.S. rapidly mobilized its economy, massively outproducing Germany and Japan, and providing crucial Lend-Lease aid to its allies, everything from planes to millions of pairs of boots. This decision, Roberts asserts, really sealed Germany's fate.
In the Pacific, the fall of Singapore highlighted Japanese blitzkrieg tactics. They were clever, as Roberts notes, very effective initially. But the Battle of Midway in June 1942 was a decisive turning point. U.S. dive bombers crippled the Japanese fleet after Admiral Yamamoto wrongly believed the USS Yorktown had been sunk. Huge intelligence failure for Japan.
Exactly. And Roberts also discusses the Chindit expeditions in Burma. What did these relatively smaller campaigns reveal? Well, the Chindit expeditions in Burma, 1943-44, were crucial for shattering a significant myth Roberts explores, the invincible Japanese Superman. These expeditions fought deep in the jungle, proved that Allied troops could survive and fight effectively in that brutal environment, challenging the perception of Japanese superiority. It was a vital psychological victory as much as a tactical one, really important for Allied morale in that theater.
Amidst all these major military shifts, Roberts dedicates significant attention to the horrors of the Holocaust, describing how the systematic extermination of Jews escalated from haphazard massacres to industrialized murder. By October 1941, SS units began using Zyklon B gas on Russian POWs and the disabled. In December 1941, Hitler declared his determination to make a clean sweep of the Jewish question. What does Roberts emphasize about the nature of this escalating horror?
He reveals the chilling progression. Specially adapted camps like Sobibor and Treblinka, opened in 1942, and Auschwitz-Birkenau, opened in 1943, were built specifically for the final solution: industrialized killing. Roberts highlights the complicity of ordinary Germans, citing the example of Reserve Police Battalion 101 from Hamburg, who, through peer pressure and obedience, became increasingly efficient and callous executioners. It's disturbing. He lays bare the utterly debased sadism and crudity of the SS. Paul Grott at Sobibor would force Jews to overeat, then urinate into their mouths, while Oswald Papa Kaduk gave Jewish children balloons before phenol injections to the heart. Just sickening details. He stresses that the factory of death at Birkenau, with its 4 gas chambers, worked at full stretch, killing an astonishing 437,000 Hungarians in a matter of weeks in 1944. German firms even patented their incinerator systems, and the stench of burning flesh was felt for miles. It's almost unimaginable.
And what's truly unsettling is that Roberts asserts Allied nations knew of these atrocities, but appeals to bomb the gas chambers were rejected by figures like U.S. Assistant Secretary of War John McCloy, citing diversion of resources and fear of even more vindictive action by Germans. Roberts paints a picture of Hitler's fanaticism, prioritizing a Judenfrei world even over the need for victory, subtly distancing himself from direct blame but favoring the harshest policies. What other evidence does Roberts present about German knowledge of these crimes?
Roberts uses powerful evidence. MI-19 recordings of captured German generals secretly discussing their knowledge and complicity. These conversations directly contradicted their post-war denials at Nuremberg. This is a critical point for Roberts, showing how few German commanders resigned their positions, even as defeat became inevitable. It's a stark indictment of the silence and active participation that underpinned the horror.
This brings us to the pivotal turning of the tide. The Battle of Stalingrad, from late 1942 to early 1943, became a symbol of resistance unparalleled in human history. Roberts notes that German plans for Barbarossa hadn't even mentioned Stalingrad, but its continued resistance made it pivotal. The city was reduced to rubble, and fighting was of unprecedented ferocity. The main railway station changing hands 13 times in 3 days. What key leadership does Roberts credit for this incredible stand?
He credits Russian commanders like Chukov, whom he describes as a tough street fighter, and Zhukov, the man who beat Hitler, as indispensable. Zhukov's masterstroke was Operation Uranus, a massive Soviet double envelopment of the German Sixth Army, utilizing the weak Romanian and Italian flanks. Brilliant maneuver. Roberts vividly describes German troops facing starvation and freezing conditions, eating horses, discussing suicide before Paulus's surrender in February 1943. Utter desperation. And while Roberts points out Russian General Chukov's hyperbole in comparing it to El Alamein, the scope of German forces destroyed at Stalingrad was indeed immense, a truly decisive strategic defeat for Germany.
Simultaneously, in the Battle of the Atlantic, the Allies faced the constant threat of German U-boats who hunted in packs. But Roberts describes a critical breakthrough.
Yes, a breakthrough Roberts highlights as an act of incredible gallantry. The British captured German codebooks from U-559 in October 1942 through the bravery of Lieutenant Francis Fesson, able seaman Colin Grazier, and Tommy Brown. Amazing courage. While Ultra, the top-secret Allied code-breaking effort, gave the Allies a massive advantage, German intelligence had also cracked British Naval Cipher No. 3, which was in use until June 1943. So it wasn't all one way. However, by August 1943, Roberts notes more U-boats were destroyed than merchant ships sunk, marking a decisive Allied victory in the Atlantic. The tide had turned there too.
Then came the invasion of Sicily, Operation Husky, in July 1943, which led to Mussolini's overthrow. The subsequent Italian campaign was a brutal grind up Italy's mountainous spine, characterized by Roberts as a bull, wearied yet still willing, butting its way head down. Battles for the Gustav Line, including Monte Cassino, were fiercely contested, just attritional warfare.
Exactly. And Roberts delves into the controversial role of Pope Pius XII, who chose not to publicly denounce Nazi atrocities. Roberts argues this decision was made to preserve clandestine aid and maintain diplomatic channels, but remains a point of, well, significant historical contention. Operation Diadem in May 1944 finally broke the Gustav Line, with the Polish Second Corps taking Monastery Hill. A hard-won victory in a grueling campaign, definitely.
Concurrently, the Allied combined bombing offensive intensified. While the Luftwaffe had begun bombing civilian targets early in the war, British Air Chief Marshal Bomber Harris adopted a controversial strategy of area bombing to dehouse German workers and demoralize the population, a policy he believed could win the war. What does Roberts say about the effectiveness and ethics of this approach? It's still debated today, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Roberts presents both sides. The U.S. 8th Air Force complemented British night bombing with daylight precision raids, ensuring round-the-clock pressure. That was key. He notes the bombing campaigns on the Ruhr and Hamburg in 1943 inflicted such damage that German armaments production growth halted for 6 months. That's a significant impact. The Hamburg firestorm, created by incendiary bombs and the new window chaff, those radar jamming strips, was so intense it was visible from 120 miles away. Devastating. However, Roberts also details the profound controversies surrounding the bombing of Dresden in February 1945, a beautiful, largely wooden medieval city. Its immense devastation and high civilian casualties, including refugees fleeing the Red Army, made it highly contentious. Survivors describe people suffocated, burnt, baked, or boiled, and bodies being cremated with flamethrowers in the rubble. Roberts leaves you to ponder the difficult moral questions these campaigns raised. There are no easy answers there.
All of this was building to D-Day, June 6, 1944, the most ghastly disaster feared by Churchill and Locke. The Allies landed in Normandy facing formidable German defenses, the Atlantic Wall. But Allied air superiority was overwhelming, a staggering 13,688 Allied sorties versus just 309 Luftwaffe. What was the critical element, according to Roberts, that made D-Day possible beyond sheer force?
Roberts emphasizes that Allied deception was absolutely crucial, particularly the Garbo spy network, which fed false information about an invasion at Pas-de-Calais. That kept a large German army pinned down far from Normandy. Genius, really. The landings themselves were brutal, especially at Omaha Beach, where many U.S. troops drowned under heavy equipment and lost their critical floating DD tanks. Just horrific scenes. He also highlights how German reinforcements were severely hampered by French Maquis, the resistance attacks on roads and railways. This led to horrific SS reprisals, like those by the 2nd SS Das Reich Panzer Division. So it was this confluence of deception, sheer will, and local resistance that truly crippled the German response.
The Falaise Gap battle finally led to the liberation of Paris on August 25. Roberts points out a fascinating detail about General de Gaulle, who famously excluded any mention of Allied contributions in his liberation speech, asserting Paris was liberated by her own people. A bit cheeky, maybe.
Yeah, it's a detail Roberts uses to illustrate the complex political dynamics even among the Allies, always jockeying for position. By late 1944 and into 1945, Roberts shows how Hitler's leadership visibly deteriorated. It was characterized by micromanagement, a merry-go-round of sackings and reinstatements of generals, and increasingly irrational stand-or-die orders. His main HQ, the Wolfschanze, Roberts notes, was a heavily fortified, somewhat suffocating environment Hitler himself called a prison. He was losing touch with reality.
The 20 July plot in 1944, Stauffenberg's assassination attempt, highlighted the general's growing frustration with Hitler. Yet Roberts argues their aim for a negotiated peace with Britain was futile given the Allied demand for unconditional surrender. They didn't quite grasp that, did they?
No, it seems not. And Hitler also had his wonder weapons, the V-1 flying bomb and V-2 rocket, which terrorized Britain and Belgium. What's Roberts' assessment of their strategic impact? Roberts concludes they were a strategic misjudgment. While terrifying, they were launched far too late to change the war's balance. Crucially, their development wasted vast resources that Germany desperately needed elsewhere. Then came the Ardennes Offensive in December 1944, Hitler's last major gamble in the West. This was despite opposition from his own generals like Rundstedt and Model. While initial German morale was high, Roberts reveals commanders knew it was futile. They saw the writing on the wall. Patton's rapid counterattack played a crucial role in containing the Bulge, and this offensive gravely weakened Germany's ability to resist the Soviets. It really set the stage for the final collapse in the West.
On the Eastern Front in 1945, the Red Army, massively reinforced by U.S. Lend-Lease aid, pushed relentlessly into Germany. Roberts describes the brutal siege of Breslau, where civilians were expelled into -20°C weather with babies dying first. Hitler remained fixated on defending vital resources, like the oil fields in Hungary, even as his capital crumbled, just detached from the human cost.
Completely. In Berlin, Roberts notes that by Christmas 1944, black jokes reflected the city's grim reality, knowing the Red Army was massing. They knew it was coming. Hitler retreated to his bunker, where poor communications led to officers plotting the Soviet advance by randomly dialing numbers and seeing if they were answered in Russian. It's a surreal detail that captures the utter desperation and chaos of those final days. Hitler committed suicide on April 30, 1945. General Krebs, sent to negotiate, was met with calm acknowledgement from Zhukov, who simply replied, "We know this," and demanded unconditional surrender. No negotiation. Berlin surrendered on Leyte, and all German forces followed 6 days later, the end in Europe.
But the war in the Pacific continued with brutal fighting, such as on Okinawa and Peleliu. Japanese stoicism led to over 1.5 million military deaths. Unbelievable resistance. In Burma, General Slim's army steadily advanced, clearing the Burma Road. To finally end the war, President Truman deployed the atomic bombs, Little Boy and Fat Man.
Yeah, Roberts explains that the decision, spurred partly by Albert Einstein's famous letter warning about German atomic research, was made to halt the war suddenly and avoid a costly land invasion of Japan. He points out that many Britons and Americans at the time felt justice had been done given the sheer brutality of the war, especially in the Pacific. A controversial decision, obviously, but that was the context. The formal Japanese surrender occurred on September 2, 1945, aboard the USS Missouri in Tokyo Bay, bringing the 6-year global conflict finally to a close.
As we look back through Roberts' work, he really emphasizes that the Second World War was a genuine team effort of the Allies, with each partner contributing in different but complementary ways. The U.S. contribution, while perhaps not primarily in blood on the European land war compared to the Soviets, was immense in armaments, finance, and mobilized forces. Roberts drives that point home forcefully.
Absolutely. And a recurring theme Roberts exposes is the post-war denials of German generals at Nuremberg about their knowledge of war crimes. He systematically contradicts them with those secret MI-19 recordings of their own conversations. It's damning evidence. He highlights how few German commanders resigned their positions, even as defeat became inevitable, showcasing a deep-seated culture of obedience and complicity right to the end.
Ultimately, the book suggests that while Churchill fought for a fading empire and Stalin for a doomed system, President Roosevelt fought for a future that largely came to pass, a Pax Americana, defined by global military bases, access to markets, and sort of a soft hegemony. Roberts argues Roosevelt's vision, unlike his counterparts, truly shaped the post-war world order.
As we reflect on this deep dive into the storm of war, it's striking how often human ego, misjudgment, and even that twisted sense of legacy collided with the sheer, brutal realities of the battlefield. Roberts doesn't just chronicle events, he constantly probes the motivations and consequences behind them. It's really thought-provoking stuff.
And yet, amidst such a storm of war, we also see incredible ingenuity, astounding resilience, and acts of profound courage from individuals across all sides. It reminds us how a combination of intelligence, technology, and strategic vision ultimately proved decisive, but never without immense human cost. That's maybe the key takeaway.
It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? Roberts details so many what-ifs and pivotal decisions throughout the book. If the lessons about the unpredictable consequences of hubris, the impact of technological advantage, and maybe the hidden strengths of determined resistance had been truly absorbed by all leaders, could the course of such a monumental conflict have ever truly been different? It's a question Roberts leaves you with.